I'm Candace Savage, and I'm here on behalf of the Northeast Swale Watchers of Saskatoon to introduce you to Larry Beasley. Larry is one of Canada's preeminent urbanists. He's a professor at UBC. He has a practice around the world, and he is recently co-author of a book called Eco-Design for Cities and Suburbs. So thank you very much, Larry, for making time for us.
Candace, I'm glad to be here. Enjoy it.
Your book is Eco-Design for Cities and Suburbs. So what's eco-design and why is it important?
Well, we're moving into a time where people all over the world are coming into cities. They're making their lives in cities more than ever and always more each year. And yet, as we design cities, very ironically, everything's separated. The design of cities in and of itself, the streets, the buildings is one frame. The environment is a separate frame. The economic development is a separate frame. And they're running into each other. They're not being brought together, and they're not integrated. So eco-design is saying, let's design the city for people, but let's also manage it for the natural environment. And at the same time, let's have a sense that it needs to have economic prosperity. So it brings that all together into an integrated view of how you design cities. So what you look at is different, and how you design cities becomes different than we've done in the 20th century. The 20th century, while it was one of the great times of building cities, was not a good time in terms of the quality of the cities that resulted, and we have to change that in the future.
One of the things that you keep coming back to in the book is transportation. And you make it clear that the benefits of cars, the personal freedom that we've all enjoyed by having cars and trucks, that's one of the advantages of modern life. And you predict with some confidence that the numbers of vehicles on the roads are going to keep increasing. But you say that our attempts to limit congestion on our roads are futile. Why futile? Can't we make our roads less congested and safer by building more roads?
No, as a matter of fact, we're learning it's the opposite. We're learning that, first let me go back. A lot of people who have looked at cities in the last 20 years or so have been hoping that with peak oil and other things, that the private car as we know it is going to become a thing of the past, and that we'll move into another kind of moving around cities. And we've heard young people are now more interested in transit and things like that. What we're finding all over the world is that the car ownership, car use is going up. It's going up even in the most sensible societies like the Netherlands and elsewhere where they have alternative modes. And we're finding that as people get wealth in the developing world, the first thing they do is personal mobility. Even before they have good housing, they go for personal mobility. So what we feel is that we have to understand this benefit and then manage it so that it doesn't overwhelm everything else, because with the benefit comes a lot of disbenefits. We used to think that if you had problems with congestion, a road was full, you just widen the road or add more roads and it would all work. And we found A, it doesn't work because you'll just fill that up, and B, the system in and of itself begins to break down. The very congestion itself begins to echo through the whole system. And so instead, what we're now saying is we've got to design our cities differently so that we need shorter trips and fewer trips, and we have choices among the way we do those trips, so that we would do local trips on foot or on cycling, we would do longer trips on transit or the private car, whatever we need, but we would make a lot of choices for our movement. In the 20th century, we got to the point that every single trip, your shortest trip, your longest trip, your most important trip, your least important trip, was all done in the car. And we know that has to change.
So when you look at the design concept for the northeastern sector of Saskatoon, do you see that new vision being represented?
Well, what I've seen so far, and I don't pretend to have great knowledge of this, but what I've seen so far is a fairly traditional approach to laying out a city. What basically tends to happen is that you look at the environment that's not urbanized as a tabula rasa. You look at it as just whatever we need to make our city work, and then the first thing you do is you lay out the street system, the road system, then you subdivide the land, then you develop the land. And when you do that, whatever that system had in it from an ecological, natural point of view is simply left behind. It's lost. Sometimes you discover some bits and pieces of it you hope you can save, but normally what happens is the city is like a monster. It grabs everything around it and urbanizes it. I have a feeling that that is what I'm seeing in this sector. I'm happy to see that there is the definition of this magnificent natural feature, the Swale, that there is an organizational arrangement to try to help save its features. But in the scheme of things, that's not enough. In the scheme of things, that's only a beginning of consciousness. What you then have to do is give the power of protection to that natural feature. You have to see how it relates to the other systems, the natural systems around it, and then you overlay the urban needs on top of that. The way we build cities, and the way it appears this city is being laid out, is that that's coming later. What's coming first is a transportation imperative. And that transportation imperative seems to be somewhat separated from even the other aspects of the city, much less anything else, and totally separated from the environmental imperative. So what needs to happen as you move a city in a much more eco-designed approach to city building is that first you would do an ecological overlay, not just in the Swale here, but in the whole area, to determine what are those important, sensitive ecological resources that you have. How do these systems work? How does water work? How do the animals move? All of those aspects. And then you'd say to yourself, okay, I know I have to move humans into this system. How do we do that? First, how do we access it? Then how do we lay out human activity in it? And it would be not the other way around. And then secondly, you would organize that planning to give power not just to the imperative of urban development, which has got all the power in the world. It's got political power, it's got economic power, it's got consumer power, it's got everything. But also power to the parts of the system that don't seem to have a spokesperson. So you would give it to nature. You would organize it so that nature is going to be a priority. And you would give it to the most vulnerable in the human community as well. You'd make sure that the needs of those not articulate in the system and not powerful in the system are brought into play.
What is the role of a real conservation area or a nature reserve in an urban landscape?
We're finding that once the natural systems that are the setting for cities starts to break down, it starts to affect both the comfort and health of the people of that city, but also their economic competitiveness as compared to other places in the world. On the one hand, we know that we need the ecology to function well in order to give us clean air, clean water, and all the things that we need to be healthy people. Secondly, we need the respite of open spaces in order to get away from the frantic psychiatry of modern cities, you might call it. And so we need places to get away. And thirdly, because people and capital around the world is footloose and people can go anywhere they want, they no longer want to go to places that is despoiling the natural environment, that is causing health problems, because they don't want their families, their children to be faced with that. And so instead, when they can, they're going to places that they hear and see as being more responsible with regard to the natural environment. In the future, I'm a great optimist. I think we'll find cities that have incredible intensity of human occupation, accommodating millions of human beings. but you'll also find them sitting within a harmonious natural system where other species are thriving as well, where there is respite and a kind of an alternative to that frantic urban lifestyle. And there'll be a harmonious balance that is achieved. Smart cities are starting that now. They're not waiting for that future. And so they're beginning to look around them and say, what is this treasure we have in the natural environment? And how do we codify it? How do we understand its sensitivities and its linkages and patterns? And how do we protect it? And then actually, how through urban development do we actually enhance it? Do we make it even work better than it might have been working in its natural state? That's the agenda really of a very smart city. And that's what I'd like to see happen here in Saskatoon. You have an amazingly intelligent arrangement for land. You already have a lot of land in public ownership, and you can put that land out for smart private development when and how you want to. And by the way, you're doing some of the best neighborhoods in the nation right now in that. You have an organization in place that is taking custodianship of this natural environment. Those are very good things. But you also have very powerful forces to just develop the city and very powerful forces in the institutions that make the decisions. And those things have to be brought into a better balance.
It seems to me that with the Northeast Swale, with this new development in this part of the city, that we have an opportunity to put Saskatoon on the map, to do something that's really of global significance. We know that there are cities that are daylighting whole rivers. We could do something really magnificent here.
You can. You have a moment of great opportunity because of all the things I've just talked about. And you can be joining efforts that are going on all over the world to try to redefine how we build our cities. And we have the examples on our fingers. You know, we have Stockholm with Hammarby, we have Malmo, we have Vancouver's Athletes Village, we have Seoul and the wonderful daylighting of their river, we have Paris and the Promenade Planty. Why don't you look at the road system, which obviously you need as you grow, and say, first, let's look at the imperatives of the natural environment that has to do with this wonderful swale and this whole environmental system. And then let's design those roads, both in terms of where they have to go and how they engage with this natural system as a state-of-the-art concept, not just another road in another open plain.
And smart cities are doing it now.
That's exactly right.
Thank you very much, Larry.
Thank you for having me. I hope I've helped. And this is very interesting.